I've almost been in this class 2 years, Alan, and it's the first time I've spoken. But I think because I thought about this a lot when I was on vacation last year, about expectations, about kind of the way I hoped things would be, and they weren't. And I had to keep going back to what we do in our emotional sobriety. But more than that, we talk about those crippling dependencies, about realizing that at adolescence. I think that was so there when I was a child and didn't have a context to know that's what I was trying to do. Living in an alcoholic family with such kind of uncertainties and inconsistencies, always trying to figure out, what do I need to do to be acknowledged, to be recognized? Do I fly under the radar? What do I do in this family to belong, if that makes any sense?
Oh,
So it's that idea of then coming into recovery and doing that 180-degree sort of turn that Herb's been talking about in my last 3 years, that no one's coming,
yeah.
that I'm the one that's responsible for figuring out how to do my life, how to change the story, um, how not to be so crippled by wanting that approval and still needing it in a lot of ways. So I hope that makes any kind of sense. But
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense, and probably a lot of people are sitting out there shaking their head. Yes, I identify with that. I identify with that. It is an interesting thing when we think about our childhood and like the experiences you have. Um, Dr. Alexander Lowen, who was the founder of bioenergetics, had a very interesting hypothesis. He says when we experience a trauma in our childhood that either threatens our sense of security, emotionally or physically, or both, or threatens our self-acceptance, which is an interesting way to say it, that trauma damages a child's self-acceptance.
yeah,
But it's so true, isn't it, when you think about that? Like you just described it, you can't accept yourself in that atmosphere. It's just not safe.
right.
So when that happens, then we are going to imagine and require that our future reverse the experience of our past. And so it sets in motion this unconscious expectation that my future is going to be the opposite of this craziness I grew up with in my past.
Without any tools knowing how to do it.
Well, that's what's incomprehensible.
Right.
See, we come up now. The reason we come up with that, I think, is actually a good thing because it gives us hope that life could be different,
Right.
right? But it's hope without any tools, like you said.
Right.
It's like going up to fix a car, an engine in a car that's not working right, but you don't have any tools to fix it with, right? I mean, something's wrong, but what do I do? I mean, how can I fix this thing? So what you said, I think really resonates with me and for so many other people here. Our childhood is so incomprehensible in many ways, and yet we try to make sense out of it.
Right.
And we can as we get older, and as you're now doing this work, now we have a path that we can find another way and to get rid of some of these expectations and learn to accept ourselves. And so thank you. Thank you for reading.
Thank you, Ellen.
We are on step 8. And as you know, those of you that have been following us, we've been going through the 12 and 12, which was written in 1950 and published in 52 or 53, I believe. And we're trying to extract from the 12 and 12 Bill's ideas about emotional sobriety. Because the 12 and 12 really was where these ideas that Bill had really came together. They coalesced, and he was able to put pen to paper and really start to spell out some of his thoughts on this. Now, I think the real synthesis came together in 1953 when he wrote that letter to someone in California that was then published later on in 1958 in the Grapevine. But we're going through now. We've gone through the first 7 steps. We're in step 8, which has made a list of all persons we had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. But I always like to start out by how did we get to step eight? What's taken place? And how is it that these steps are helping us achieve emotional sobriety? Now, the concept we started to talk about a couple months ago is that we're really looking at what we're thinking about is starting with the second first step. The first step, as Ernie Larson described it, was a desperation step. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol if we were an alcoholic, and that this alcoholism was destroying our lives. But we had no tools within our own resources and the way that we were organized, our personality and our sense of self was organized at that time. We had no tools to deal with it. And once we could admit we were powerless and we stopped the struggle, is now we were able to find another power. That experience is an experience of the paradoxical theory of change. That change occurs when you admit and accept what's going on, not when you try to be someone you're not. I went to great lengths to try to control my drinking and my use of other drugs to no available. And when I surrendered and I realized, I'm just unable to do that. I have a limitation. That's not who I am. I'm unable to. When I accepted that, I no longer struggled with the desire to drink or use. It was lifted from me. And I could then take the second half of the first step was, seeing how my life had become unmanageable as a result of my alcoholism and drug addiction. But this second first step is asking us to go back and look at how our emotional dependency has created this unmanageability in our life. So I'm urging you as we go through these steps, think of it as the second pass through the steps. This pass, we are putting on these emotional sobriety lenses, and we're looking at the steps and looking at ourselves and what we need to do from this perspective of what do we need to get unstuck in our development. Emotional sobriety has to do with growing up. It has to do with correcting a growth disorder that we have. We're stuck. We're not sick, as I like to say. We are stuck. We're stuck at a it's all about me stage of development. And emotional sobriety is going to help us grow beyond that. That's the incredible gift that we're given, is to be able to enlarge our consciousness and to not just make everything about us, so that we can have a healthier relationship with ourselves, with the world, with our issues, all this kind of stuff. So we talked about how each step creates an energy, a force, a charge, if you will, that then compels us, moves us in the direction of the next step. And that step that follows, let's say step one, that first charge is I'm powerless, my life is a mess, I don't have the resources to turn it around, I am hopeless. Believe it or not, that hopelessness is a very therapeutic experience. Bill said all the time that our recovery is based upon a pedestal of hopelessness. My hopelessness opens me up to what's next, and that's where step two comes along and resolves this existential crisis that step one creates, and now says there's hope, that you can grow up. You can learn to live your life in a very different way and let go of these expectations and let go of this I'm okay if consciousness. I'm okay if things go my way. I'm okay if I get what I want. Or I would be okay if this didn't happen to me. We even need to let that contingency go. As we're moving towards what is much more reflective of emotional sobriety and maturity is I can be okay even if things aren't going my way. So each step is moving us in the direction of growing up and moving us towards more and more emotional sobriety. After we make a commitment, step two creates hope. But hope without action is meaningless. So step three is our first affirmative action to begin this new way of life. one that's based on self-support instead of emotional dependency or environmental support. And then we have to take, now that creates a charge. All right, I want to do this. I want to grow up. It says, okay, well, sit down and take a look at yourself. Take an inventory. Take a look at who you are and who you're not. Take a look at where you're stuck in your development. And so we do that and we take it to another person to share it with them so that we become aware of these things. And now we want to bounce this awareness off someone else. We talked about that person being an enlightened witness that can point out things that maybe we missed, that we didn't see, or point out our blind spots and stuff like that. So that takes us into step 6 and 7. So step 5, after we've shared what we've discovered in step 4, is about, now, um, you know, the way I really like to think about step 6 and 7 is now we are going to pivot towards the best possible attitude we can have in life. And what does that mean? But let's think about this for a second. Our programs cannot take us further than our definition of our recovery. So I want you to pause for a minute. How do you define recovery? Is recovery just abstinence for some people? If they're just not drinking or using, or if they're adhering to a food plan, or they're not having a codependent relapse or anything like that, that they say they're fine with that. But what emotional sobriety does is it creates the possibility of enlarging our definition of recovery to include growing up, to include emotional maturity. And when that becomes our new definition, now almost anything goes. It opens up so many possibilities that go way beyond looking at the first step. Now we look at our emotional dependency, what effect that's had in our life, how that's limited my possibilities, the big lie that's based on, that I need things to be a certain way for me to be okay. But we also now get to connect the other dots, as now it opens up the possibility of us needing to address our trauma if we've had trauma in our life. Is to start resolving some of the unresolved issues in our life so that now the quality, or what Larson called full recovery, what I like to call is optimal recovery, becomes a possibility. I think Bill referred to it as being rocketed into the fourth dimension. So as I said before, step 6 and 7, well, these two steps are possible because of the work we did in steps 1 through 5. So humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings, and we're entirely ready to have God remove our shortcomings, our character defects, was all a result of all the work we did in the first 5 steps. So steps 1 through 5 laid the foundation for this radical shift in our perspective and for the discovery of the new possibilities in our life. We are looking at ourselves and our problems in a very different way. One shift that takes place is that we realize the problem is never the problem. The problem has to do with how we're coping with what's going on, not with what's going on. That in itself is priceless because that focuses on what we can do to deal with the situation, not who's at fault. Steps 6 and 7 tell us what we need to let go, or tell us that we need to let go of our old ideas and develop the best possible attitude that we can develop towards ourselves, towards our problems, our relationship, and with life itself. Steps 6 and 7 are shifting us towards the best possible attitude and focusing on the kind of relationship we have with ourselves, with our problems, with other people, and with life. So we pivot away from this emotional immaturity that says, I'm okay if, and we move towards growing up, towards an emotional autonomy, towards emotional freedom. This is what I was talking about before. The first step is, or was about looking at our powerlessness, and it was a desperation step. This second first step has to do with looking at our emotional dependency and how it's impacted our lives and how we can engineer a healthy relationship. Well, listen to what Larson says. He says, the first step in engineering healthy relationships is to look at yourself so you can deal with the living problems that underlie addiction. That's our emotional dependency. In other words, he says, you are not doing two different things when you deal with your living problems and when you work to become a more able and trustworthy partner in your relationships. They are the same journey. Right on, Ernie. Ernie had a lot of insights. So the way I like to think about it is seeing the worst in you is the beginning of finding the best in you. You have to see the worst in you and to be able to own that before you can start to grow to what you can be. And that's what emotional sobriety is doing, is helping us come. So now when we make a list of all persons we had harmed, become willing to make amends to them, now we need to look at the harm that's been done by our emotional dependency. What impact has that had on our lives? What impact has that had on our relationship with ourselves, with our problems? How has that contributed to our problems? And how has that impacted our relationship with the people we love and care about, as well as with life itself? That's a very important reflection. And I encourage all of you to be sitting down and thinking about, after this meeting and the next days before our next meeting, is to really think about what impact that your emotional dependency has had on your life. What has been the harm it's done? We'll get a few suggestions. This is Virginia Satir. She goes, one of the truly basic problems is that our society bases the marital relationship almost completely on love. We're going to put love in, emotional dependency in parentheses after that, and then imposes demands on it that love can never fulfill. And that's why I don't think she's talking about mature love here. She's talking about an immature love. It's an immature love is a love that's based on emotional dependency. She says, if you love me, you won't do anything without me. You hear the dependency in that? So if I won't let somebody do something without me, I'm essentially holding them hostage, aren't I? That's the harm that's done. If you love me, you'll do what I say. The harm that's doing is that the relationship is not I to thou. I'm treating the person I'm in relationship as an it, and they are there to meet my needs. So they're an object of my affection, not a subject. If you love me, you'll give me what I want. I mean, think about that. We're so demanding, and then we make people feel bad when they don't do that. You're not a good partner. You're not giving me what I want. If you love me, you'll know what I want before I ask. So we play this kind of a mind game that they're not being a good partner if they're not reading our minds. She goes, these practices should turn love into a kind of a blackmail. In the rooms, we call it taking hostages. She calls it the clutch. But you can see what our emotional dependency is doing in that situation. Well, let's look at Dr. Greenwald and what he says. He goes, expectations grow out of our emotional dependency, lead to the erosion of any relationship. The myth that the resolution of loneliness will result because we have found an intimate one-on-one relationship is a cop-out. It begins a toxic process which dissipates the mutual nourishment that occurs when both people are committed to sustaining nourishing interaction and growth of their separate selves. Fritz says it this way. This is Fritz Perls. He goes, our dependency makes slaves out of us, especially if that dependency is the dependency of our self-esteem. If you need encouragement, you need everybody to pat you on the back, praise you, then you turn everyone into your judge, everyone into your parent. Virginia Satir says, if you're not eternally showing me that you live for me, then I feel like I'm nothing. I feel like a nothing. If you're not eternally showing it, I am so dependent on my sense of self because of my emotional dependency. If you're not showing you live for me, then I'm nothing. See, I have no sense of self that's independent from you. Dr. Miller says it like this. He says most relationships have become entangled in a web of need and resentment where they have lost their way. They may even have lost track of whether or not they ever really cared about each other. And the need and resentment come from the dependency and expecting someone to give us, to make us feel whole, to make us feel good about ourselves. And if they don't do it, we resent them. Bill said it this way. He says, our demand for emotional security, for our own way, had constantly thrown us into unworkable relations with other people. Though we were sometimes quite unconscious of this, the result had always been the same. Dr. Harriet Lerner says learning to observe and change our part in relationship patterns goes hand in hand with an increased sense of personal responsibility in every relationship that we are in. So when we talk about pivoting towards the best possible attitude, it's one of taking personal responsibility for our lives. Bill even said this later on in the 12 and 12, I believe, that if that at some point in our recovery, as we develop more and more emotional sobriety, the word blame is dropped from our language. Blame becomes irrelevant. It's what do we need to do to address the situation, not whose fault is it, but what do we need to do to address the situation? Instead of worrying about who spilt the milk, let's get it cleaned up. That's more important than figuring out who spilt it. This is another impact that this has had. It's not possible for me to relate to other people and relate to others intimately and to allow, and I put in there and enjoy that person's full expression of themselves if I've not discovered how to do this for myself. So if I am not free, if I have all these rules and expectations for myself, you can rest assured that I'm going to project them on you. See, the truth is that we treat other people the way we treat ourselves. I'm going to do to you what I'm doing to myself. And sometimes I'm not even aware of it because I'm projecting it on you. Here's another thing. We're always trying to get, as Virginia Satir says it this way, we're always trying to get out of our emotional jail. Mostly we try by begging, threatening other people, or pleasing other people, trying to get them to do it for us. So our emotional dependency, as you can see, starts to give us a license. It's like a 007 license to kill. We have a license because of our dependency to control others and to try to get them to bend to our will and to do what we want them to do so that we feel okay. And finally, what Greenwald shows us is that one of the hallmarks of creative intimacy is the absence of shoulds, must, or other demands on ourselves or others. You see, that's where we're heading with emotional sobriety, is to let go of these demands, let go of these shoulds. And we do that by first sitting down and really getting in touch with the damage that our emotional dependency has done by generating all of these ideas. All right,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Well, please share your thoughts and comments about step 8 in making this list. And really focusing tonight, I'm trying to focus on how we can think about the harm we've done from our emotional dependency.
I'm Herb. I'm an alcoholic, and it's really good to be with you tonight. Thanks, Alan, for the warm up. And step 8 is really misunderstood a lot, I do believe, in the rooms, because when I have general conversations with individuals and or groups, And the topic of step 8 comes and harms comes up. They start talking about what they did. I'm going to stop for a minute. Harms is not what they did. Harms is the negative impact
Mhm.
of what they did on other people. The negative impact. How was it received?
Yeah.
It's a huge distinction.
Yeah. How was it
My
experienced?
behavior, Mhm.
Yeah. How was it experienced by the other
How
person?
was it experienced by the other person? I use the word, how did I diminish their life? How did I bring a lack of quality to their life in a various ways of finances, perhaps, relationships, perhaps, opportunity, perhaps, physical, even sometimes. Uh, harm done. And that was what got to the heart of the matter for me when this man asked me, number one, to be specific, not general. Oh, I hurt their feelings. Oh, yeah, really? You're not that powerful or important, Herb, he would say to me. And he said, get specific. What was the impact? And in some cases, because of his questions, I was able to see, well, I didn't really harm them. I just had guilt and shame, but there was no real impact. Or in other cases, oh, there was a real impact, and I was clueless. I just assumed that they were collateral damage to me living life. And that's just like, okay, that's their problem, not my problem. And so it was really a very important experience, but I was equipped for it because, and you connected some dots for me tonight when you talked about I am responsible in step 4. That's the first time I had a clue that I was responsible for my thinking. I was responsible for my beliefs. I was responsible for my motives, and I was responsible for the consequences of all of that in terms of my actions. But it was in step 6 that I saw that I was uh, responsible for the consequences of my behavior. And it was the behavior that had to change, of course, with motives and beliefs and all of that. And then in step 8, the impact of my behavior on somebody else, and then to try to sort out through counsel with experienced people what that might look like. Can't change the past, but you can attempt to repair the damage in some fashion. And Chuck C. in New Pair of Glasses has a great line. He says, it's about justice. It's about balancing the scale. How do you balance the scale? And we need to be spiritual and creative and get guidance from experienced people in doing that. And that's why I've been so lit up in the last 20 years with Dr. Luskin about forgiveness, because that's what that's is all about. That's the sweet spot, the heart of the outcome of this process of steps 4 through 9 is literally the healing that comes from releasing them from by acknowledging your part in their misery, but also releasing them and being released yourself because of the change that will come about, because step 8 is about that willingness to change so I don't continue to create the problem, but willingness to attempt to bring healing to somebody else. And I got a whole other page I could go on. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks, Herb. Thanks.
Well, you guys gave me the one two punch here today because I thought I knew what I wanted to say after Alan talked, and now Herb, you talked, and now it's I've said this throughout the last 5 years with working in this group. It's like I mean, it's to me, it's just I'm just in awe and extremely grateful for how much deeper I've been able to experience the program, the steps when we look at it. Not just it's not just look at it deeper. It's like we we're challenging each other. Look at it from this angle. Have you ever looked at it from over here? Turn your head this way and look, and it's like all of a sudden, because so today with from Alan to Herb, after you where you were speaking, Herb, I'm going when you're talking about What I heard was ego when you said the harm is not what you did. It's like I thought, okay, that was another part of my ego. It's all about what I did, and it's like the other piece is that I would in those days I easily assumed, even if I was acknowledging that I had hurt somebody, I assumed I knew exactly how they felt. And I'm talking about doing eighth and ninth step work all the way into recent couple of years. Is like when I I've learned to not be surprised when I realize I didn't have any idea what kind of impact I had on somebody. It's like, and I one in particular I'm thinking about tonight it's just very helpful to me because it was one I had postponed forever because I've had so much shame about it. And it's like, and this person was so honest in responding, and she specifically, not in great detail. It was a brief response. It was actually doing it in letters, not even email. We were writing letters, and it's like it was. She described very very briefly and concisely how what that impact was. And it did not feel good to hear that. It's like, and it was, it made me know that this was the right thing to do. And she was very respectful of my reaching out to do that. But it's like, it's one more huge experience in humility. It just comes back to that. And, and I don't know if this even fits anymore, but the thing I was coming away with after you, Alan, was talking about when I'm just going, okay, this is going through looking at the impact of the addiction of my emotional dependence on people. It's like, notes I made about myself here were control. And it was both control freak of other people. Specifically, I'm thinking about my wife at the time, um, and but it's also, and I never thought about it this way. I was very versatile. I would get my self-esteem from controlling, or I thought I would, controlling other people, or just surrendering my control to somebody else and letting them be in charge of my self-esteem. But it was always external. It's everything about this brings, and I'm not being clear right now because I'm just getting clear in my mind, but everything about all of this work that we do it just fits so much with the fact that I always talk about the intrapersonal process. It's all about what happens inside us. What is that all about? What does this mean between me and me? And well, so thanks.
You, Tom. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you. And it is, I can easily say that whatever I have to offer here tonight, that I owe it to the work I did with Herb. Year after year, it was like being beautifully worn down, and one of my favorites, when you said step 8, one of my favorites is hearing Herb go, it's you make a list, and you stopped right there, because in step 8, and I had that experience too, step 7, it's this humbly you're in a place, and I think they even say it in the 12 and 12, where it really brings up the pride and the shame around humility, that this is a humbling thing we're in now, right? We're in step 7. We've done all that. We've talked to people. We've done all that work, right? And now we're in this place where the only thing we're doing is we are faced with it. We're sitting in our own stuff. We're ear deep in, no, they didn't. It wasn't their fault. They weren't mean. They didn't hate me, right? And if they did, it's none of my business. right? And what did I do to set it up? And how did I gossip or how did I manipulate? And why did he hate me? Because I was an asshole, So that to me this was where step 7 was. And then you go to step 8, all in this frothy kind of whatever. And I'm getting humble here and I'm getting humble here, whatever humble is. But now I got pride around being humble, and I'm dealing with the pride around being humble because now I'm a humble person, don't you see? And and then you roll into step 8, especially if you're brave enough to get in that line with her, which, oh my God, and go up and say, I don't understand. Like, what if they this and what if they hate me and what if they never want to talk to me again? And step 8 and da 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 da, and it's still all about me, 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 right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that stopped my brain and stopped this was Herb would say, what does step 8 say? Right? What are you going to do? And it's you're going
List,
to make a
a
list.
list.
You're not going to have the drama of your life. You're not going to go running up and make amends to grandma. You're not going to like apologize for cheating on whoever. You're not, you're done with all that. Stay here and deal with, for what I thought, for what mine was that experience of acknowledging humility and sitting with, I did do that. I'm not I'm not the good one in the whole act. I'm not the good one in the whole show, and that's the bad person. I did these things, and
Yeah.
I'm still okay, and I'm still here. And on to the next step, which is you make a list. And then you deal with not catastrophizing it, not whatevering it, and I had to keep coming back and coming back and coming out back from these scenarios or these whatevers that was just more ego. So, yeah, I would say that transition 7 to 8, 7 to 8. I kept going back and forth, and I think that's part of the process, 7 to 8, 7 to 8, until you can live in your own shoes. You can live in those shoes. That frees everybody else from you. That one thing, right? That one ability to live in your own shoes. You're not the devil, but you're not free of the consequences of what you've chosen. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, a couple of things came up for me as we were talking through and Alan was presenting is, my level of responsibility is equal to my level of honesty, which is equal to my level of consciousness, right? I don't know how much how many people I need to put on the list, basically, and for what, until I start to have this relationship with honesty, reality, and to live more consciously. And I love the visual of thawing out that Herb uses, right? It's like I start to thaw out to reality and to living life consciously, to steal a chapter out of Alan's book, and then I start to see, what I've done and what my actions had impacted and what kind of result they showed up in other people's lives. And for me, I look at to talk about emotional dependency and what I did was just like when Alan brought up the slide about I want the the problems in my childhood to be resolved by my future, right? And I forgot whose quote that was, but like I clearly was putting, you know, my wife in the position of fixing the sins of my mother, right?
Mhm.
And, the demands, first unconscious demands, and then somewhat conscious demands, and eventually, full awareness of how I needed her to behave a certain way in order for me to be okay. And in the justification that was going on was that, well, you know, I just wanted to be happy, and if she was happier, then then everything would be. really what it was if she's happy, then I'm not disturbed. It was like
Yeah.
this whole like I was really thought it was about her being okay, but it really was about me being okay with her not being okay. And that like pressure that I put on the relationship and either I would, you know, either try to, you know, artificially lift her up, or I would get frustrated and angry with, you know, with behavior or her conditions. You know, none of that was, you know, emotionally sober. And but the good news is, again, because of this kind of iteration, you know, of this work, you start to see it, start to understand it. Where is that coming from? Oh, that's right. That's where that comes from. And then realize that there's you know, there's the harm that is, you know, being caused and that it belongs on the list. And, you know, I've been with my wife a very long time. You know, we got, you know, we've known each other since we were teenagers. So there's really no mystery here, you know, in terms of, you know, how we interact, but the responsibility changes, right? It's like, okay, can I lighten up? Can I lessen up? Can I put that energy where it belongs versus put it on someone else? And then the relationship just magically gets better, right? Because I'm doing my part. The playfulness of it is, you know, so you know, my wife will say something like, "Oh, you know, you're making me anxious," and I'm like, "I didn't make you anxious. You came anxious. You showed up anxious." She goes, "Yeah, but you're a catalyst," and I and like, and then I'm like, "Oh shit, I am a catalyst for anxiousness." You know, and can I is it important enough for me to be that way, right? And to hear her or just let her be anxious, you know. And so that's the good news in this is that, you know, there's just again the continual awareness and responsibility and humility, you know, turns into some really good living.
Mm.
So say it, Herb, make a list.
Just make the list,
Yeah,
man.
Just make a list.
I love it.
Uh, well, you start to contemplate, you start reflecting on this stuff, and when you start to think about, man, if I look at some of the subtle ways I've harmed people, that list starts to get pretty big, doesn't it? I mean, when you think about like even in, you know, even like standing at a grocery store and getting impatient with the person in front of you.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a very interesting thing, right? It's because it's down back to this thing. Don't you know how important I am? You should move quickly because I'm behind you, right? Kind of a thing. And no, I don't know how important you are. I'm doing my own thing here, right? Kind of a thing. Um, and I had experienced that at a bank one time. I think I shared this with the Berlin group and maybe shared it here too once,
Hmm.
um, but I went to a Bank of America to make a deposit. And there was an elderly woman, you know, she was probably in her 80s, and ahead of me, and she had her purse open and all this stuff out on the counter. And there's just one person in and she was the only person. There was just one teller, and they were having a chat. And obviously, her banking was done, but he's having a very nice conversation with her. And I'm trying to meet a friend for lunch and stuff. And I thought I'd just run in because that bank, this was in Westlake Village, California. Nobody was ever in there. You could run in, deposit out in 3 minutes, right? Well, this was going to take a little longer than that. And I'm standing there getting impatient. And all of a sudden, I realize, you know, if stop thinking about that this is all about you and look at this woman. And that's the thing I think the gift of that this is leading us towards. Instead of treating people as objects, right? The objects of our affection, the objects of our desires, we're treating them as subjects. We're starting to consider them and their feelings. And this step is a step towards empathy and towards us recovering our ability to understand how other people experience us. As you said, Herb, what experience are they having with us? I may not have intended to make you feel this way, but you may be feeling that way. And instead of quibbling about who's right or wrong, if I let go of who's right or wrong, I can just say, wow, I can see how much that bothered you. And I can be sorry for that.
Yeah,
You know,
but I didn't mean it like
oh,
as
well,
as an
that's a
excuse, right?
well, it's whitewash. We're trying to whitewash ourselves and
Yeah.
prove to people we're good people and stuff. And see, that's the other thing is that as we move towards this empathy for other people, we don't have to prove we're a good person or
Mm.
not a bad person or whatever that is anymore. Our self-esteem is not on the line all the time. It's not constantly in jeopardy. And that's where we're trying to grow ourselves to that point.
Right.
So. Well, thank you. Thanks, Steph, for joining us tonight and sharing. And I appreciate you doing that.